Welcome to the Human Side of Money, a show dedicated to equipping financial advisors with the skill set required to work with emotional human beings on the emotionally charged topic of money. You'll get practical tips and insights on applying behavioral finance into your practice from conversations with fellow advisors, industry consultants, and experts in the fields of behavior, psychology, communication, and more. Each episode is designed to help you enhance client outcomes. Now here's your host, Brendan Frazier.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Human Side of Money. Today we're going to be talking about a popular topic this time of year, but we're going to come at it from a different angle, a more effective angle. If you're trying to, or if you're in the business of helping your clients set and ideally accomplish their financial goals, you have to understand the psychology of goals, but more importantly, you have to understand what actually drives lasting human behavior change. As I sit here and record this episode, it's what psychologists and researchers have dubbed Quitter's Day. It's the second Friday of January where they've discovered that the majority of resolutions have failed by the second Friday of January, not because there weren't good intentions, not because there weren't good goals set, but because good intention and good goals and information and knowledge is not sufficient to drive lasting behavior change. Those are all psychological problems, understanding human behavior, and most importantly, understanding the things that actually change human behavior, but not just temporarily over the long haul. And if you can understand those things, then you can work with clients to set financial goals and then maximize the likelihood that they're able to actually set goals that they can follow through on and accomplish and achieve over time. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go over 6 psychologically driven, evidence-based ways that you can help your clients actually follow through and accomplish their goals because they're proven to be lasting forms of changing behavior. Now, before we get into that, I want to mention something really quick. It's also that time of year where you guys are sitting down, advisors are sitting down, and you're starting to map out and envision and put together plans of where you want your business to go, how much you want it to grow, where you want it to grow to, not just for 2026, but probably even 5 and 10 years down the road. And if you look at the research, what it says is that the number one barrier to growth for advisors and advisory firms, no matter where you are or what stage you're in, is a lack of time. And I would say it's a lack of time, but it goes deeper than that. If you want to know what actually sabotages growth, it's a concept that I call time fragmentation. So it's not just necessarily a lack of time. It's the ability to not know how to allocate and utilize your time. It gets fragmented. So I just wrote an article on how time fragmentation sabotages growth so that you can understand exactly what that is, how it's blocking your growth, and maybe most importantly, the things that you need to know to help overcome that in order to grow. How do I actually overcome time fragmentation so I can grow the way that I want to moving into 2026 or 5 years or 10 years down the road? So if you're the type of person that says, hey, I want to learn about this, I want to know what the problem is, and I'll come up with a way to overcome it, that's what the article's for. It breaks all of that down. If you're the type of person that says, hey, I want to grow and I know that time is a barrier to my growth, but I don't want to read an article on what it is. I just want you to tell me what I need to do about it. I've got a path for you as well. We actually put together a playbook called From Reactive to Intentional, the Reactive to Intentional playbook for advisors that gives you the tools that you need to overcome time fragmentation and create and build a more intentional and impactful calendar that drives the kind of growth that you're looking for. So if that's you and you're going, hey, I want the article so I can learn about it, that's going to be in the show notes. If you're saying, hey, I just want the playbook on what I need to do about it, that's in the show notes as well. But as you start thinking about growth in 2026, that's going to be your number one barrier is time. And this article and this playbook tell you everything you need to know to allocate your time and build a calendar that overcomes time fragmentation. So check that out if you're interested. All right. Let's move into it. The 6 strategies, 6 psychologically driven, psychologically based strategies that drive human behavior change to help maximize your client's likelihood of setting goals they can actually accomplish. And not just this year, by the way. You can meet with a client in the middle of the year and they can set a goal. And knowing these principles is going to help you maximize their likelihood of following through. These are things that are relevant and important no matter when you're talking about goals. It'll be relevant this year and next year and the year after, no matter when you're meeting with somebody. And I'll say one more thing really quick before we dive into them. There's 6 of them. And I hesitate to say that some are more important, but I think there are a couple that are maybe more impactful. That if you were to pick one or two to pull the lever on, to focus on, to try to nail, I think there's two that drive the biggest results or that would create the biggest impact. And they're number 1 and number 6. So I've bookended them in these strategies. Number 1 and number 6 are probably the two most impactful. I would also say that they're probably the hardest to implement and embrace and start doing on a day-to-day basis. But once you do it, they're the ones that tend to drive the most lasting behavior change. So let's start with number 1. Number 1's one that if you've listened to this podcast or if you follow any of the content that I put out on LinkedIn, you have to have probably heard me mention this at some point in time. But that's the idea of finding your why. The way I often say it is that behind every what lies a why, or every what needs a why. And that's because your why is your purpose. It's your motivation. It's your energy. It's what you need to keep going on the days when you don't feel like doing it. It's what you need to power through and stick with things over the course of time once your willpower has already started to wane. So again, behind every what lies a why. And if you want to maximize your likelihood of accomplishing a goal, you have to not just get clear on what you want to do. You want to fully embrace why you want to do it, why it's important to you. So here's an example that I often give because I think it's relevant and impactful and everybody can relate to it. I have a friend who once said that his goal was to lose 20 pounds. And so I said, okay, interesting. That's a good goal. In my mind, I'm sitting there going, okay, I know that behind every what lies a why. He says what he wants to do is lose 20 pounds, and that's good. But let's try to uncover the motivation, the drive, or the purpose behind it. So we go into this conversation and I say, all right, what are you going to do to lose 20 pounds? He says, all right, I'm going to wake up every day. I'm going to work out at 5:30 for an hour. And if I do that, hopefully by the end of the year, I'll have dropped 20 pounds. And so I'm thinking, okay, I mean, that sounds good. The likelihood of you doing that every day doesn't seem like I'm not going to put money on it. Then I said, okay, why is that important to you to lose 20 pounds? He said, well, I feel like I've gained too much weight. I want to look better and feel better. And so that's we got somewhere with that. But the next question was, why do you want to look better? Why do you want to feel better? And I'm going to fast forward through some of the conversation just to get to the essence of it. But ultimately what we got down to was he said, I don't necessarily just want to lose 20 pounds. What's important to me is to be able to feel better and have more energy when I get home from work so that I can be more present and active with my young kids. Because when I get home, they're physically and mentally demanding. And if I'm not the best version of me, if I'm not in great shape, I wear down faster and I can't be as present and active as I want to be. So you can see that on the surface, the goal itself was to lose 20 pounds. And that's good. Goals are great. Don't get me wrong. What you want to do is important. You need to know what you want to do, but it's just as important to understand why you want to do it. Because when his alarm goes off at 5:30 in the morning, if his alarm goes off and he lays there in bed and he's thinking to himself, man, I really want to lose 20 pounds, it's going to be easy to hit the snooze button and go right back to sleep. But if his alarm goes off at 5:30 in the morning after a late night out, and instead of thinking about losing 20 pounds, he's thinking about how he's doing this to be able to be more present and active with his kids. That's a much more powerful driver. It provides much more motivation and energy to keep going in the times when you don't want to do it. It provides much more emotion. It provides more motivation. It provides more energy to understand why you do what you do, why you want to accomplish the goals that you've set out to achieve. So when you're thinking about, or you're working with a client and they tell you what they want to do, they give you the what goal. Just remember, behind every what lies a why, and try to ask questions that uncover that. So if somebody says, for example, I want to retire at 65. We'll say, what's important about retiring? What's important about retiring at 65? I want to build a deck on the back of our house. What's important about the deck? Or the other way you can ask that same question is to say, let's imagine that you have a deck on the back of your house. What changes in your life? What does that deck do for you? And you're going to find out as you ask questions, as you stay curious and dive into and try to understand the why. You're going to find out that, well, if we have a deck on the back of our house, then we're able to, we have more fun. We'd be more confident in inviting some of our friends and community over to celebrate events together. Right? So then you uncover that it's not just about the deck. It's about being able to facilitate and foster more community and connection with the people that they care about and the people that they love the most. That's number 1. All right. The second strategy is to inject clarity. Inject clarity. Dan and Chip Heath have this quote when they talk about behavior change where they say, oftentimes a lack of behavior change is simply a lack of clarity. That we set these goals. We say we have these things that we want to do, but they're too vague. There's not clarity. They're not vivid enough to feel personal and motivating. So here's a classic example that pops up in financial planning all the time, and it's a great one to use. So whenever you have somebody that says, I want to retire when I'm 65, that's a good goal, but it's a vague goal. There's no clarity there. It doesn't say, hey, here's what I'm going to be doing when I retire. Again, another example that I use a lot is you want to try to get somebody to inject clarity into their goal. So if somebody says, my goal is to retire at 65, then you want to try to get them through through questioning and curiosity. You want them to try to paint a clear, vivid picture of what they envision themselves doing in retirement. So it's great to have this goal of retiring at 65, but we want it to be clear. We want it to be vivid. So what does that look like? Well, when I retire at 65, so again, it requires good questions, being curious, trying to get them to paint the picture for you. And retiring at 65 would translate into, when we retire, we want to go to Disney World 2 times a year. We're going to take the entire family. We want to stay at the Swan and Dolphin Hotel. We're going to have everybody make their favorite meal one night of the week. And then when the kids go to bed, the grandkids go to bed, we're going to stay up late playing games just like we used to in the good old days. And while that's just one thing that they're going to be doing, that's a much more clear, vivid image of what retirement's going to be than just retiring at 65. So when it comes to needing to save more money or stay disciplined and stay invested when the market takes a downturn, or when it comes to trying to get things in order to be able to retire, retiring at 65 isn't necessarily very clear. It's not motivating. It's a goal, but thinking about the trips that you're going to take and how you're going to do things with your family and go to Disney World twice a year and stay in this very specific hotel provides a much different level of clarity, which leads to more motivation and a deeper connection to the goal, to drive lasting behavior change that's necessary to accomplish the goal. So anytime you have a client who gives you a goal, it's most likely going to be vague. So just ask really good questions that help them paint the picture as far as what would it look like when you're doing that. Get a very vivid, detailed picture, a clear picture of what that goal would look like. Number 3 is the concept of reasonable over rational. Reasonable over rational is based on this principle or the idea that long-lasting behavior change and goal accomplishment requires a certain level of confidence from the human being. So we have a tendency when we set goals and we think about goals to overestimate what we're capable of. We're motivated. We're excited. We've got all this energy. It's like the calendar flips to January 1st and you feel like a new person. The old me was last year. This is the new me. And I'm going to be able to do all these amazing things that the version of me last year wasn't able to do. It's not a bad thing. We want to harness some of that energy, but we have to recognize there's this tendency to overestimate what we're actually capable of. It's like my friend who says, you know what, he's been on social media every day, every night before he goes to bed for the last however many years. And he walks into the new year, and on January 1st, he's like, all right, this year, I'm not going to get on social media for the whole year. And it's like, okay, that's a good goal. It comes from the right place. How likely is it that he's actually going to be able to do that? Probably not very good. While it's a rational goal that comes from a good place, it's really not reasonable. And if you were to ask him, hey, how confident are you that you can actually do it? Even in his best moment, he's going to think, well, I don't know if I'm going to or not, but I'm going to try. Research tells us, when you look at psychology and behavior change, research will tell you and emphasize over and over again that there has to be a level of confidence in the person for long-lasting, sustainable behavior change. Another example is if I set out and said, hey, you'll take my friend who said, I'm going to lose 20 pounds. If his goal is to lose 20 pounds and we said, hey, how are you going to do that? If he said, well, I went to this site, I did some work, I put together a plan, and it says that if I only eat 1,000 calories a day for the next 6 months, I'll easily drop 20 pounds. It's like, that's good. That would probably work. I don't doubt that it would work. But there's 1,000 calories in a salad at most restaurants. And so if you sat there and you look at it and you're like, how quickly do I get to 1,000 calories? You realize that's really, really hard to do. And his likelihood of being able to do that over and over again to see the results of the compounding impact of his habits is pretty much it's not going to happen. Right? And if he realized how few calories 1,000 calories is, and we sat down and I said, hey, how confident are you that you're going to only eat 1,000 calories every day for the next 6 months? He would, if he was honest with himself, he would say, yeah, that's probably not sustainable. So when you're setting goals, you want to set goals that where you have a high degree of confidence, you can actually follow through and achieve and accomplish the goal. So if you tell somebody, hey, in order to get to where you want to go, in order to be able to retire in the time frame you want to retire, you need to start saving $5,000 a month. And they're like, well, right now I'm saving $500 a month. If you ask, hey, how confident are you that you can save $5,000 a month? The reality is they're probably not going to be very confident they can do it. That's a big jump. So one of the ways you can assess confidence in your recommendations or in the goals that they set, and one of the ways that you can help boost confidence is just simply by asking, how confident are you that you're going to be able to accomplish this goal? And if the answer is not very confident, then you dial it back and say, okay, what's a goal that you're confident that you're able to, that you would be able to sustain and stick to and accomplish? We need confidence and having goals that aren't just rational and optimized for a spreadsheet, but goals that are reasonable and able to be sustained are the key to building confidence, which ties in almost perfectly and directly to number 4, which is prioritizing progress over perfection. We want to start focusing on not just getting to the ultimate goal, but we want to focus on progress and celebrating wins along the way. Or the way I like to think about it is this idea and this principle that small wins create big momentum. Small wins create big momentum because what they do is that if you can start getting these small wins and stacking small wins along the way, they boost confidence. They accelerate confidence. So for example, in his book, Atomic Habits, James Clear talks about the person that wants to run a marathon. And he says, if your goal is to run a marathon, you're not going to set out and say on day 1 and say, all right, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go out and try to run 26 miles, 26.2 miles. That's going to kill your confidence. You're going to get out there and realize how hard it is. And you're not going to feel very good about getting back out there the next day. But if you prioritize progress over perfection, if you focus on small wins out of the gate, because small wins create big momentum, then your goal for day 1 should be, my goal for the day is to get outside and run, not run 26.2 miles. My goal for the day is to get outside and run any distance and try to do that for a week straight. What happens is if you're able to set these goals that are focused on progress rather than perfection, if you're able to build these small wins that create big momentum, it helps create the habit that you need that can then be adjusted upwards. So if you go outside and you run any amount, you just get outside and you do it for 7 days straight, you're starting to build the habit. You're starting to get into the routine. And then you can start figuring out and adjusting upwards, saying, okay, now I've been out 7 days in a row. Maybe now I'm going to start trying to run 2 miles. See if I can do that for 7 days straight. And then after that, you go, all right, now I'm going to go 3 miles. The point is, you're not trying to run a marathon from day 1. You're focusing on creating the habit, using small wins to build big momentum. You can always adjust upward. If the goal is, if you need to save $5,000 right now, you're only saving $500. Maybe you start by saying, okay, let's start by going from $500 to $1,000. Save $1,000 a month for a while. Get good at that, and then come back and reevaluate and go, okay, now can we up it to more? What would feel comfortable to up it to now? Can we get to $1,500? If you try to go from $500 to $5,000, it's not going to work very well. But if you can prioritize progress over perfection, let small wins compound over time, that's what actually drives lasting behavior change, which takes us to number 5, which is what we call identifying inertia. As we think about some of these required elements from the research, these required psychological elements that lead to long-lasting, sustainable behavior change, another one that shows up time and time again as being extremely important is this concept of resiliency. Resiliency meaning that if you set a goal and you set out to accomplish the goal, almost inevitably, you can almost guarantee that life is going to happen. Things are going to get in the way. The best plans don't always go perfectly as imagined. There's always a curveball that gets thrown, things that get in the way. So this idea of identifying inertia is intended to build and focus on resiliency. When you set this goal and life throws you a curveball, how do you react and respond? How resilient are you? And the way you do that is that you prepare when you set a goal, you spend some time as you start out preparing for failure and planning for failure. If you think about the last time you got on a flight, an airline flight, and you were going somewhere, I can almost assure you that the pilots in the cockpit, one of the things that they did before you took off was they didn't just have one route that they were going to take to go from point A to point B. They got in the cockpit. One of the things that they do is they identify the various different routes that they need to be aware of that they could take based on a variety of factors that may get thrown at them, which, by the way, is a great thing. If you're on an airplane, you don't want them to just have one route and all of a sudden the weather flares up and they're not prepared for it, or the air pressure drops and they're not prepared for it. They're thinking through all these things, saying, okay, we're going from point A to point B. Here's the optimal route. But if we get thrown a curveball, if something pops up that we're not expecting, or actually let's anticipate the things that could pop up and have a plan. Goals work the same way. You go, I want to go from point A to point B. I want to accomplish that. But there are things that are going to pop up along the way that I need to prepare for, that I need to have a plan for, so that when they do, I'm able to, I already know how I'm going to react. I know how I'm going to respond. They're not going to derail me and get me off course. So for example, one of the ways you look at this is you go, you ask yourself, you ask your clients, you say, take whatever the goal is that they set out to accomplish. Maybe their goal is to get their estate planning done. You go, okay, imagine that it's 3 months from now. It's April of 2026, and you're sitting there and you still haven't gotten your estate planning done and in order. It's still not accomplished. Whatever your goal is, it's not accomplished. What could have happened in that 3 months that would have prevented it? And so I did this myself a long time ago when it came to some documents we had to get in order. And I forget exactly what it was for because it was a while ago. But I sat there and went, okay, what if I weren't to have this done, what would have happened? And the reality is I sat there and was honest with myself and thought, okay, this is something I'm planning on doing after I get home late at night when the kids go to bed, which, by the way, is when I have the least amount of energy that I'll ever have during the day. And so if it was 3 months down the road and I still hadn't gotten it done, odds are it's probably not done because I'm trying to do it at a time when I have the least amount of focus and energy to do it. And so if I know that going into it, I can identify that as a sticking point that's going to come up in the future. Then I can then say, okay, then I need to try to figure out another time to allocate a different time to allocate to get that accomplished. Right? So you're identifying the sticking points, the barriers that may come up, A, to avoid them out of the gate, or B, when they do come up, you have a plan for how you're going to react and respond to them. It builds resiliency, and resiliency is a cornerstone of the psychology research on what leads to behavior change. Finally, number 6, the second of our bookends, of the two that we said that are probably the most powerful and impactful in terms of long-lasting behavior change, it's changing your identity. The research shows that lasting change is identity-based. In fact, identity-based change is 3 times more likely to drive long-lasting behavior change than goals that are set based on motivation. Here's what that means and what it looks like in practice. Your goal might be to read a book a week, or it might be to read 52 books in a year. The motivation to do that might be you want to get smarter, and that's good. Where real behavior change comes in, where it's the most long-lasting, is when you change it from, I want to read a book a week, or I want to read 52 books, to I'm a reader. The goal isn't to read 52 books. The goal is to become a reader. The goal isn't to run a marathon. The goal is to change and shift your identity to become a runner. Your goal may be to save $25,000, but the path to creating long-lasting behavior change that makes you most likely to save $25,000 is to change your identity to becoming someone who's the type of person that saves before they spend. And where that becomes powerful is we're all wired psychologically and neurologically in our brains to act in a way that's consistent with how we perceive ourselves, act in a way that's consistent with our identity. And so if you can rewire your identity to I'm a runner, I'm a reader, I'm the type of person who saves before they spend, then it's going to be a lot easier, let's say. Maybe you don't naturally do it. It's a lot easier to start incorporating the actions and the habits of that type of person. You can even ask yourself, what would someone who is a reader do in this situation? What would someone who saves before they spend do in this situation? You start watching your actions and your habits line up with the type of person that you want to be, the type of person that's congruent with your identity. So there you have it. 6 psychological principles that help drive long-lasting behavior change. Let's run through them one more time. You've got number 1, find your why. Number 2, inject clarity. Number 3, reasonable over rational. Number 4, prioritize progress over perfection. Number 5 is identify inertia. And number 6 is change your identity. Accomplishing goals is really, really hard to do. That's why there's a day called Quitter's Day. And it's hard because information alone is not enough. Behavior change isn't driven by better goals. It's driven by psychology. And if you work with clients and you want to help them maximize the likelihood of accomplishing their goals over the course of the lifetime working with you, you have to understand the psychology of goals and the things that actually create long-lasting behavior change in other human beings. And if you can start figuring out how to apply these 6 strategies in the conversations that you have with clients day in and day out, you're going to maximize their likelihood of setting goals they can actually accomplish, whether it's in 2026, 27, 28. You're going to set goals they can actually accomplish over the course of their lifetime. It would be easy right now to get overwhelmed and say, okay, those are 6 things, and I don't know how I'm going to go incorporate 6 things. That's totally fair. Pick the 1 or 2 if you want that you thought, okay, that made sense. Or you thought, okay, if I could crack that one, that would make a huge difference. Pick the 1 or 2 that fall into those buckets and focus on those, do those first. And then once you get those implemented where you're comfortable with it, then you can start expanding and embedding some of these other elements. But even doing just one of these is going to help your clients maximize the likelihood of accomplishing their goals. And yes, by the way, for those of you that tied it all together, that suggestion there at the end was a perfect example of prioritizing progress over perfection. All right. That's all we got. Again, if you want to help growing in 2026, you want to understand time fragmentation, or you just want the playbook for how to build a more intentional calendar that optimizes and focuses on the things that'll drive what actually produces growth to overcome the lack of time that you may have. Remember, that's in the show notes. The article's in there and the playbook's in there. And if nothing else, always remember, plans and pie charts don't change lives. People do.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of the guest. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. The commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by the guest or RFG Advisory or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change anytime without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. The guest and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.